Still getting audio.
It's both of you.
It's only the left channel.
Are you still hearing stuff?
What's that?
Check if you're still hearing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's okay. Let me see if there's anything else. Yeah.
Alrighty.
Are we ready to roll?
We are ready.
Shall we take places?
Let's take our places. Places, everybody. Places.
Karen Cower, be in the movie with us, the video.
Stream. Alright, I think I turned everything off. Can you see if you hear anything?
And I turned everything off. What's that?
Oh, I meant to say something.
Everyone should have the opportunity to wake up every day and do what they love. You already have your own unique perspective, your own unique voice. We're just here to help you on your journey of learning, discovery, and creation. My name is Aaron Nace. Welcome to PHLEARN. Your creativity should never be limited by a tool or a piece of software. That's why we've created hundreds of hours of in-depth tutorials that break down the nuts and bolts of Photoshop, Lightroom, photography, and more. Whether you're opening one of the programs for the first time or you're already a working professional looking to further master your craft, we got tutorials that are designed to challenge and inspire you. We cover everything from high-end retouching to the magic of photo compositing to the fundamentals of capturing that perfect image in camera. Everything you need to keep on creating. Join our growing community of millions around the world and transform your passions into a way of life. Subscribe today and unlock your creativity.
We're live.
We're live? It's like, where's Aaron? I can't get back here. Are we live?
Are we doing the
did
video?
it. Did we do a video?
Yes.
Did it already happen? We're live!
Are we live?
We're
Oh,
live!
hi.
We did it! Hey everyone on YouTube and all of our wonderful social medias. Welcome to PHLEARN Live. I am so excited. My name is Aaron Nace and with me is my wonderful host, Sheree. Sheree, what are we doing today?
Today we are going to be taking questions from our viewers, and we're going to do some editing on their pictures, and we're just going to have some fun.
We're gonna have some fun. So if someone would like to submit a question for us, how can they do it?
Well, they go to phlearn.com/live, upload your picture, your question, and we'll get it and answer it.
That's right, guys. So we're doing this all week long. So today you can join us from noon to 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, as well as 4 to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can submit a question all day long. We're going to be getting to your questions. So we're hanging out. We hope you guys have just a bundle of joy hanging out with us as well. All right, Sheree, are we ready for this? Let's go ahead and start our little broadcast.
All right, we're waiting on Seth.
So we're starting off with a little debate between Canon and Nikon, and I want you guys to join in the chat. But I'm going to throw a little curveball in here.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to introduce Fujifilm into the mix because if you guys saw our recent PHLEARN episode on YouTube, you'll know that I recently fell in love with the Fujifilm. I have an X100F and I absolutely love that camera. So,
You know, I've not shot with film.
you've never shot, well, it's not a film camera.
Oh, it's not?
It's not a
digital?
film. So Fujifilm is the brand.
Okay.
And it's a digital camera.
Oh.
But what's cool about it is they built in all of the color profiles that they made when they were actually when they were making
Yeah.
film. They built in those color profiles into the camera,
Interesting.
and it's so good.
Is it a small compact?
It
or
is a small
full
compact
frame?
camera. In fact, I think I have it here with me. Do you want me to go grab it?
Yes.
Okay.
Go grab it.
I'm gonna go grab my camera. I'll be 2 seconds. In the meantime.
In the meantime, upload your pictures at phlearn.com/live. Send in your questions. There's also a wonderful promotion going on right now. You can get 30% off all tutorials and your subscription. Follow the banner on the site and join us on the PHLEARN Pro side. So Aaron's back with his camera.
I've got my new sweet member of my family. So I've been shooting Canon for years.
Okay.
I picked this little guy up just kind of like as a fun carry it around with me camera, and I've been absolutely blown away at the image quality. Check it out.
Yeah.
It's got a really good feel. It's super well built. Here, I'll turn it on for you.
It is on.
Oh, it is on.
Yeah.
See, it's very easy to use.
Smile,
Sheree
everyone.
already knew how to turn it on. You just took a picture of literally everyone
I did. I
on
said smile,
the internet.
everyone.
So I'm pretty blown away myself. You know, historically, the whole idea is Canon and Nikon own the market, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
I think what's happening with mirrorless is super interesting. First, in my opinion, Canon and Nikon are kind of slacking on the mirrorless front. They're kind of lagging behind. You know, they're not leading
That's not technology.
the fight. And that's leaving space for Sony
Yes.
and Fujifilm and other manufacturers to come in there and introduce these kick-ass products that are, you know, studio shooters like me who've got the big cameras and stuff like that.
Yes.
I'm gravitating towards these smaller cameras.
But I like this idea of letting the smaller fish in. It's gonna make a competitive market, bring down the prices on these excessively expensive cameras, and more people can take a little guy like this on long trips
Exactly.
and
yeah.
get that good shot.
Exactly. This is not, it's not intimidating. I take it with me everywhere I go. It comes with me. And honestly, if you guys haven't seen the free episode that I just did on the Fujifilm, you guys should check it out because you can also download sample raw images from this Fujifilm.
Oh, it's nice.
And I've shot with this thing at night at ISO 51,000.
What?
And it's fine.
No noise?
I mean, there's some noise, but at
Yes,
ISO
well.
51,000, this is like the same amount of noise as in my Canon 5D at ISO like 6400.
Oh, that's impressive for a little guy.
It's absolutely insane. So basically, I'm taking this, I can shoot like basically in the middle of the night at like f11 at 1/500th of a second.
Incredible.
What?
I know.
Really cool stuff. So anyway, if you guys haven't checked out these Fujis or the mirrorless cameras in general, I highly suggest doing so. They've totally changed the way that I shoot, and plus, man, they just look so cool. I mean, I get the appeal of a giant digital SLR if you want to
Yes.
look like you're a professional photographer.
Yes, but then you have 5 kilograms to carry around with you.
Yeah, and everyone looks at you like, oh, look at that big camera. This thing, you get the performance of one of those big
Yes.
cameras, but you don't look, you're not intimidating.
Yes, it's excellent for street photography.
I completely agree, and that's what
Nice and discreet.
That's
and
what I
you
use
get
it
the
for.
shot.
Yeah, I photographed a celebrity in Chicago a couple weeks ago, and he was not happy about that at all. He gave me a very, he was upset with me.
Did you tell him you're a niece?
I didn't, you know,
Well, you
I
should
should
have
have told him
spoke up.
that.
He would
I'll
have
say,
said, "Please take
I
some
know
more."
you're a celebrity, but I want you to know from one celebrity to another one, it's okay, man.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Show off.
no, he's an actual celebrity.
Oh,
I'm
that's what you think, Aaron.
I'm
I
a
call him the
Photoshop
Brad
nerd.
Pitt of photography.
Well, that's one
Yes.
person who calls me that. Let's get into our questions.
right.
Thanks so much for being patient with us, guys.
Yeah, we're going to image 16, Aaron.
Image 16.
And it's a question from Argentina, from Julia. She asks, when you sharpen a picture at full size and then you decide you want to post it on the web, do you resize and sharpen again in the same file, or do you remove the sharpen you applied for full size pictures, resize for the web, and then sharpen the smaller picture?
Okay, that was so many words.
Yes, I think Julia's
Okay.
asking at which point should you sharpen to post on the web.
Okay, that's a great question, Julia. So I'm looking at the questions here, and I think the image 16 actually goes with the second question because we got 2 questions. So basically, the question from Julia in Argentina is saying, when do I sharpen? When during this process am I supposed to sharpen my images? And I know that can be a little bit confusing. So here's my general advice. If you are working with a large image and you sharpen that image in its full resolution, if you decide to shrink that resolution down to post it on the internet, you're also shrinking down your sharpening.
Yes.
So here's the deal. You want to make sure you're sharpening after you do any type of resizing. So if you're going to put your image on the web and you're going to put it at a width of 1200 pixels, go ahead and change your width first and then put your image on the web. Now, if you're going to be printing this full size, then do your sharpening at full size. So let's go ahead and show you. For those of you guys who don't know how to sharpen in Photoshop, there's some incredible tools in Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a sample image, and we're going to work on a sample image here. So let me just go ahead and find a sample image. This looks really nice here. There we go. Let's jump here into Photoshop. All right. So I'm just taking a sample image. Now I'm using a stock image website here called Unsplash. It's one of my favorite stock image websites, and it's free stock images, and the quality is really, really good. Okay, so let's go ahead and start off with general sharpening in Photoshop. So if you guys are not, if you're not aware of how to sharpen in Photoshop, we're gonna start you off with general sharpening. So my favorite method to do this is using the high pass method. So what we wanna do is duplicate our background layer to start. So I'm gonna hit Control or Command J. That's gonna duplicate my background layer. Now, it's super important that whenever we sharpen, we don't want to affect the colors in our image, okay? So I'm gonna desaturate this layer. So we're gonna go to Image, down to Adjustments, and over to Desaturate. So we're just gonna take all the color away.
Right.
Okay, so the next real step in this is I'm gonna apply a high pass filter. And the high pass filter is what does the sharpening. But before I do the high pass filter, I'm gonna change this into a smart object. Now, let's switch back to the other camera for our conversation. Cherie, do you know what a smart object is in Photoshop?
Yes, I think so.
Let's hear it.
Okay, when you convert an image to a smart object, you make it a non-destructive image.
So
you can remove whatever edits you made on it.
Look at that. And
I'm a learner.
She is a learner. And the cool part too is if you're gonna apply a filter to that image or to that layer, you can change that filter at any time.
Okay.
And that's super helpful. Like if you have a blur, sometimes you're not sure how much blur you want to put on something. Well, you can change that blur even later.
Okay.
So that's the big benefit of using a smart object. All right, let's jump back into Photoshop and I'll show you how to do it. So first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna convert this into a smart object. So let's right click. I'm gonna go here in Photoshop to convert to smart object. Now, once this is a smart object, let me just go ahead and make my thumbnails bigger. Once this is a smart object, you're gonna see a little smart object icon right here on the lower right side of your thumbnail. So that means it's a smart object, you're good to go. Okay, so my next step here, we're gonna change this layer blend mode from normal down to overlay. Now, right now it doesn't look that good, obviously. The big thing here that we're gonna be doing for the sharpening is we're gonna be running a high pass filter. Okay, so we're gonna go to Filter, down here to Other, and over to High Pass. So here in your High Pass filter, you can move this little cursor around your image and kind of get an idea of how much sharpening you're gonna apply to your photo. Now, my suggestion is to go to the place that you're going to focus on, maybe your subject's eyes. So basically what I'm looking for here is to bring out the amount of detail in our subject's photo without going too far. Because if I go too far, you can see it's not bringing out any real detail. So we want to go down just a little bit lower. Something like that looks really good. Maybe we'll exaggerate a little bit more. In this case, I'll go to 4 pixels. So let's hit OK there. All right, so that's our sharpening done to our photo. Now let's zoom into our photo. I'm gonna hit Command plus a couple times till I get to 100% zoom. And we're just gonna turn this layer off and on. So here's off and back on again. Isn't that cool?
Very cool.
So off and back on again. Now, the whole deal with the reason I made this a smart object is because, our heating just turned on. Let me just turn our heating off because it's gonna make a bunch of noise and it's gonna destroy our broadcast. That's right, folks. We're broadcasting from a real live studio with real live air conditioning that sometimes turns on during your real live broadcast. Thankfully, we have the Nest app, so I can just turn it off from my phone.
That's right, yeah.
All right. So the reason why I made this a smart object is because now we can actually change this high pass filter at any point in time. So to change the high pass filter, I'm gonna double click right here on the high pass filter. And check this out, I can change my radius, which is basically just gonna change the sharpening of my photograph. So even if you don't get the radius perfect the first go round, you can change it at any point in time. So that looks really, really good. Now, let's just turn back to the dual camera, the conversation cam. We'll call this the conversation cam.
All right.
All right.
Let's conversate.
Let's conversate. So we learned how to sharpen an image, and this is at full size. So this is like, okay, cool, we're sharpening our image at full size. Now, the question was, what happens if I need to resize this image? What do I do with my sharpening? So the method that we just used to sharpen our image, we made a smart object, right? Which had a smart filter. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to resize my image, and we're going to need to adjust the radius on our smart object. Okay, so you want to adjust your sharpening after you resize. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to create actually a duplicate. There we go. We're just going to duplicate this entire, basically this entire document. I'm going to hit Control or Command and click on both of these layers. Now I'm going to right click and go to Duplicate Layers, and we're going to go down to a new document. Okay, which is just a really good bit of workflow sometimes in Photoshop when you want to try something out, especially when it comes to resizing, because it's happened to me before where I've finished an image and then I resized it small and then I saved it.
Oh, so you go over and start over?
I have to start over again. If you make an image small and then you save it, it's like, oh my gosh, now I have a very small resolution. So something that I've learned, you know, just from making this mistake over and over again, if I'm gonna resize something, if I'm gonna make something really, really small, I'm just gonna create a duplicate of the whole document, because I don't want it to auto-save. I don't want, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to lose all my work because now it's just a much smaller image.
And if you have many layers, you group and then duplicate the group.
Exactly. Yeah, if you got a bunch of layers, you can group them all together. You just right-click, go to Duplicate. There we go. Duplicate Layers or Duplicate Group, and then you just choose a new document here. So it's really easy to do. Okay, so this is going to be my resized document. So let's go ahead and put this, we're going to go to Image, down to Image Size, and we're going to put our width here. We'll just say at 800 pixels. There we go, and hit Enter. So we can see we resize. Now, here at 100% zoom, you can see my sharpening doesn't look so good anymore, right? Because my sharpening was done on a larger image. So what I need to do, let's hit F for full screen. So what I need to do is go into this smart object. I'm going to double click here on my high pass filter, and I need to choose a different radius. I have a smaller image now, so my radius needs to be smaller as well. So let's go ahead and lower our radius down to something that's just a little bit more flattering for this photograph. All right, in this case, it's like a 1.2. That looks really good. Now I can turn this sharpening off and on. Let's just zoom in a little bit so the folks at home can see it. Turn that off and back on again. And we'll zoom that out to full screen and turn that off and back on again. So you can see this sharpening is super important to do after you resize, because basically you're going to be sharpening at a certain radius. You're going to be sharpening with a certain amount of pixels, and it's super important to do this after you resize. That was a great question.
Yeah, perfect, good. So we're moving to Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Cheyenne, Wyoming.
A question from Val.
All right, Val.
Yes, this is image 16.
This is image 16, okay.
And she's asking, do you have an order that you do when you retouch a portrait?
All right, well, let's go ahead and close these images out. All right, so this is image 16 here. Is this correct? I'm at the right image here?
Yes.
Image number 16. Okay, so Val in Cheyenne.
Cheyenne.
Okay, Val in Cheyenne is asking, do you have an order when it comes to retouching your portraits? And there most definitely is an order. Okay, so here it is. Basically, anytime you're going to be doing any type of transformation, let's say you're going to use the liquify tool. Have you used a liquify tool ever?
Once or twice.
Once or twice, okay. For those of you guys who don't know, the liquify tool will basically allow you to like push and pull pixels around.
Yes.
So if someone has some hair that's kind of going out crazy, you can like push it back in.
Or want to look 5 pounds lighter.
Or you can do that as well, yeah. So basically you can push things around in Photoshop. So if you plan on doing any type of that adjustment, like if you're going to be actually moving pixels in Photoshop, I highly suggest doing that first. Okay, that's going to be the very first thing you're going to do. Now, not every image will need that, but if you're going to do any type of liquify, do that first. That should be your number one. Okay, now your number two should be your general blemish removal. Okay, so, you know, little spots on someone's face or some trash in the background, whatever it is, that should be number two. So your general object removal. Now, for those of you guys who may be a little bit more advanced and are doing things like frequency separation, that should be your next step. So frequency separation should be your next step. And we have some great tutorials on PHLEARN on frequency separation as well. So that's gonna be your next step. Then the next step after that is going to be your coloring. And then the next step after that is gonna be any type of sharpening or finishing effects that you're gonna have on the photo. So that's my order when it comes to retouching. Now, we do have an image, and I'm gonna jump in and just do a little bit of retouching on our subject, kind of give you guys an idea of some of the things that I look for when I'm retouching. So I'm not gonna do any liquefy here. I don't think that's really necessary. You know, if you were to do anything, you know what? Actually, I'm gonna do a little bit to her hair, not because I want to,
Yes,
but because I want to show you guys the
yes.
demonstration. I want to show you guys the general order. So anytime you do a liquefy, you want to make sure to duplicate your background layer. You never want to do this on your original image, and the reason is because if you do it on your original image, it's going to destroy the pixels on your original image, and we don't do that here. We practice non-destructive editing. So let's go ahead and create a duplicate of our background of our background layer. I'm going to go to filter and down to liquefy. And in this case, I'm not gonna really work on my subject herself. We're just gonna do a little bit with hair, and you'll be able to see what we can do. So with the hair, I'm just gonna start by dragging from the inside, and we're just gonna pull this out just a little bit. And this is something that I like to do to make people's hair just look a little bit more full. You can add a little bit of a wave to it if you'd like. You can do all kinds of fun stuff. You're like your own hairdresser here at this point.
You don't need to buy hair mousse.
Yeah, you don't need to buy mousse at all. Just say, fix it in Photoshop, please. So this would be the first thing. You can see I'm just kind of like filling out hair just a little bit more and kind of adding a little bit of wave and a little bit of curl into it. Now, as you do this, just be careful, because if you mess up, you can actually start to move someone's face or a detail in the background. Like, for instance, if I do something like this to the background, you're gonna see pretty quickly that that was done in Photoshop, right? So just be sure, you know, when you're doing any type of liquefying or any type of moving pixels around, make sure you keep that in mind. So let's hit OK here. There we go. And we'll see the before and after. So here's the before and the after. It's just a little bit of stuff, you know, give the hair a little bit more volume. And again, that should be the very first thing that you do whenever you retouch. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is a little bit of blemish removal. So let's go ahead and create a new layer for this. Always want to be on new layers. And I recommend starting off with the spot healing brush tool. So the spot healing brush tool, make sure at the very top you're set to type. You want it to be content aware, super important. And you want to make sure sample all layers is checked. That's also super important. So here we're just gonna zoom in, and basically you just wanna paint over any type of little area that you'd like to remove. Just a little spot, little blemish, something like that. This is where you just wanna paint over it just a little bit. Okay? And there we go. And you can see we all had days where we, you know, woke up and we had a little spot on our face and things like that. So let's take a quick break from this and talk about the ethics of retouching. Okay.
How far do you go?
How far do you go? Well, here's my point of view. If it's something, especially when we're talking about people's faces here, right? It's a pretty delicate matter.
Yes.
If we're talking about something that's like here today, gone tomorrow, I got no problem removing that,
yes.
right? Like if I woke up this morning and I had a big pimple on my face that would be gone next week anyway, no problem removing that in Photoshop. Like,
agreed, yes.
Totally cool. A little bit of redness on your skin, whatever,
yes.
No problem removing that sort of thing as well. What we don't want to remove are anything that's going to be like permanent, you know,
like
a birthmark, a scar that's like a defining feature, you know, anything like
identifying feature.
An identifying feature, we don't want to remove any of that sort of stuff.
Yes.
So that's my personal view when it comes to retouching. And also, I want the skin to look real. You know, I want it to be like, I don't want this plastic, smooth, no skin texture effect.
No wrinkles.
No wrinkles,
no crow's feet.
Exactly. So if you are working on an image where you do want to like maybe take out some wrinkles, I don't recommend taking them out completely.
Yes.
I recommend reducing the visibility of those wrinkles. It's going to look a lot more natural.
Yes. I agree.
You agree?
You could go into Photoshop and finish your picture and it looks nothing like the person you know.
Exactly.
And that would be so wrong.
That's kind of insulting.
It is.
It is, you know, a little bit.
Yes.
It's like, what, you don't think I look like,
I know.
you're not happy with the way that I actually look? You got to make me into a plastic figurine? It's kind of insulting.
It is.
So
yes, when
anyway,
it's extreme, yeah.
let's hold that, you know, and keep it going in the chat, guys. I want to know what you have to say about the ethics of retouching as well, because obviously everyone's got a different opinion, and that's why we're doing this live, so we can see all of your opinions.
Yes.
Okay, so let's get back into our image. Here we're going to do a little bit of blemish removal, and you can see I'm just kind of like getting all these little spots. And I think a common misconception when it comes to retouching is that you need to be super zoomed into someone's face. And I really don't believe that. I think you can do the majority of your retouching without even zooming in more than this. I really don't recommend zooming in too far. You wind up focusing on tiny little pores that you don't even see if you look at the image zoomed out. Okay, so there's some blemish removal. Just paint over that with little, you know, spot healing brush tool, and our subjects look great already. The next step that I'm gonna do is a little bit of coloring on our subject. So a lot of the time, our little blemishes and things like that, the blemishes will appear, and sometimes they'll color our face or body as well. Like you'll get a little bit of redness.
Yes, discoloration.
A little bit of red. So the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna take care of that red areas.
Okay.
Okay, so first I need to figure out a way I need to target the red, and then I need to reduce the red.
Okay.
Okay, so let's get back here into Photoshop. There we go. We're gonna create a hue saturation adjustment layer, and this is gonna allow me to target the reds on my subject's face. So let's go to our reds. This is what we're gonna target, and I'm gonna use my eyedropper here to just target the reds on the reds that I wanna just shift slightly. Okay, now my next piece of advice here, it's gonna look pretty weird for a second, but what we wanna do is we wanna exaggerate what we see, because I need to target just specific reds, right?
Okay.
So I need a way to kind of like exaggerate that. So what I'm gonna do is bring up the saturation, and I'm gonna bring up my hue like to the max.
Okay.
It's gonna look super weird on the portrait, but it's just a way I need that as a retoucher to see what I'm actually affecting. Okay. So now that I've targeted my reds, I'm gonna bring up my saturation, and I'm gonna bring up my hue. So you can see when I did this, you can see the area that's being affected now is more than just the specific reds that I wanted to affect, right? It's kind of the whole image. So now what we're gonna do is use these sliders here on the bottom part of our hue saturation adjustment layer, and these sliders will allow me to actually fine tune just the red areas that I want to affect. All right, so let's start here. I'm gonna click on this slider, and we're just gonna bring this in. There we go. And then we're gonna click here, and I'm gonna bring this in as well. And now I can take the central point and start to move this from the left to the right, and we can see different areas become highlighted. Okay, I know it looks super freaky, and I apologize to this person, because I'm really not trying to, you know, you look great. I just need to be able to do this to see what I'm actually doing in Photoshop. Okay, so at this point, that looks pretty good. We're kind of targeting some of those areas that I'd like to reduce. Okay, so what I'm gonna do at this point is I'm gonna bring both of these values back down to 0. So we're looking like we did with the original photograph. And now here I'm gonna take my hue, and we're just gonna slide that to the right, just a little bit. Okay, so we're actually taking that red hue, and I'm just pushing it closer to orange. Okay. I'm pushing it a little bit closer to the skin tone. Okay, so sliding that to the right a little bit. I'm also gonna bring up my lightness just a little bit. There we go, and with that, our saturation.
So would you do this for someone that's darker skinned as well?
Definitely, definitely. The values would change, you know, how much
you push it.
How much you push and pull, but yes, definitely. Okay. That's a great question. So you'll notice that this affects my subject's lips. So we always want to make sure to put a layer mask on that, and then layer mask out their lips and mouth, because that obviously you want that to be, you know, the original color.
Right.
Okay, So let's go ahead and turn this layer off and on so you guys can see the before and after. So turning this off and back on, you can see all that little redness area, all those little red, like little spots and things like that. We're just able to target those little red areas and reduce them. We're able to move them more towards the rest of the skin tone.
And still maintaining the natural look.
And still looks totally natural. You know, we're not overdoing anything here.
Yes.
That's not our goal. We would never, I don't want anyone to look unnatural. I mean, honestly, when I first started retouching years ago, I couldn't help it.
Yes.
The people that I retouched, they did look unnatural. I wasn't trying to make it that way. I didn't have the level of subtlety or the level of finesse to make them actually look good.
I think we all start with the extreme and then realize, oh, we've done too much here, back it up a little bit.
Let's back it up.
But also when you do portraits, people pictures for magazines and catalogs and things, the retouching is excessive.
It can be.
People relate to that better. I'm not even sure why, because
we're
our
all
imperfections make
brainwashed.
it beautiful. Yes. So you cannot compare your everyday picture to what you see in the magazine.
Exactly.
So that should help know when to stop with the retouching.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, we're not trying to sell magazine covers here.
Yes.
Yeah, and we're all brainwashed into thinking that's acceptable anyway.
I know, yes.
So, moving on. It's like we're doing retouching, but I'm like shitting on it the entire time. Like, obviously,
it's-
retouching is important,
It's
but
very important,
you know,
but in moderation.
Yeah.
Like all good things.
yeah, we
in
don't need to.
moderation.
Yeah, we don't need to be like giving people complexes about their looks through.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, I've grown a little bit of like a ethical dilemma as a retouching instructor,
That's
you know,
wonderful,
because I'm like, I don't actually think we should be doing this as much, but I teach this, so it's like I've got the little bit of that.
Contradiction.
Yeah, a little bit of that going. Okay, so already we're looking really, really nice. Now, the next thing that we're gonna use is frequency separation, which is one of my favorite techniques for just generally like evening out skin tone. And I'm gonna be going, there's kind of not a lot of steps to frequency separation, but it's a little bit of a complicated thing. So, if you guys need any help with frequency separation, just type in frequency separation on PHLEARN.com. We've got a Photoshop action that will just take care of it. It'll just do it for you. All you need to do is a little bit of painting, makes it much, much easier. So I highly recommend that frequency separation action. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm gonna load in that action actually. So we're gonna go to Window, down to Actions, and then I'm just gonna make sure this is an 8-bit image, because we have a frequency separation for 8-bit and one for 16. Okay. So let's go to my PHLEARN frequency separation. I'm gonna go to the 8-bit and hit play. Now, basically what this action says is it wants you to blur the skin just a little bit so you don't see any skin texture. Okay, so blurring just so we don't see the skin texture. Okay, and that looks pretty good. So let's hit okay there. And then we're gonna hit continue. So what this action does is it creates a high frequency layer and a low frequency layer.
Okay.
So the high frequency layer, this actually has your skin texture on it. Okay, so if I make this visible and invisible, you can see this is the layer that has my texture. Okay?
Oh, yes.
Now the layer underneath it, this is the layer that has my color. So all my editing in Photoshop, I wanna make sure that my texture is still intact. We don't want to go destroying skin texture. That is not the proper way to retouch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to like basically smooth out the tone underneath the texture. Okay. That's my goal here. So we have our texture layer. I'm going to create a new layer in between those, and this is where I'm going to start smoothing out the tone of the skin. Now, to do this, I recommend using a low flow with your brush. So we're going to be using our brush tool here. Let's go ahead and close all that stuff out. We're going to use our brush tool. I recommend using a low flow of your brush, something like 10% flow.
Okay.
Now use a soft edge brush, and then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to sample over top of our subject's skin. There we go. We're going to sample right here, and then I'm just going to simply paint a little area right around where I sampled. And what this does is it basically allows me to take the color of the subject's skin, paint it around a little bit, and kind of even out the tone of that area just a little bit. Now, this effect should be really subtle. This should be a subtle effect that you use to slowly build up, okay? And as you do it, you kind of, it's one of those things where like if you can't even really tell that you're doing it, then it's correct. You're doing it correctly, because with this technique, you have the ability to pretty much change a person's face. You know, you can change a lot about how a person looks. And you know, we just want to keep things on the subtle side. So that's super important. So painting in here, for those of you guys who are watching at home, it may look like I'm literally doing nothing. Can you tell if I'm doing anything at all?
I can.
You
see
can
it
tell?
very subtly.
It's subtle.
Yes.
Right? It's
so if you go over the same spot over and over, does it build up?
It'll build up, exactly. And that's why we use a low flow with our brush, because the idea is you go over the spot that you want to work on, and you can just go back and forth on it over and over again. And when you're happy with it, when it looks good, then it's time to just move on.
Right.
Move on to your new spot. Now, this is a very subtle type of retouching, and I would recommend taking your time with it and also practicing. You know, right now I'm doing it a little bit faster than I normally would because we're working on, it's here in a live broadcast, right? So I'm trying to make sure we get as much done and as many people's questions answered as possible. So I'm going a little bit faster than I normally would. Usually this process would take anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do this on every single picture you take, but you know, if someone says, hey, can you do like, you know, high-end retouching on this photograph? Can you do like, you know, really nice retouching? You can say sure. And if it's a client, you know, if you're being paid to take these photographs, you know, be sure to build in your time for retouching as well. A lot of people, they don't charge for the retouching, but that's your time, you know? Your time is super valuable. And when I work with clients and they ask me to do a certain bit of retouching, I'll give them a price, a range. I'll say, yeah, I think that'll take about this many hours, and here's my rate for this many hours. And then I'll make sure to say ahead of time, you know, hey, I think this is going to take this many hours, and this is my quote for you, okay? Right. If you ask me to do anything above this quote, I'm happy to do it. So always say that, you know, like, yes,
keep the door open.
I will do this. Like, you know, I will most definitely do this.
Yes.
I'm going to have to let you know that anything above this is going to be, I'm going to charge that at my hourly rate as well. So, and
because
from the
it's
beginning,
super time consuming.
it is, and people don't know that it is.
Closely.
People don't know how time consuming it is. You know, that they just assume, most people hear Photoshop and they think there's just like a button.
One button. Oh
it's
my
like
gosh.
the retouch
it's so
button.
Far from there.
Right? But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of labor.
Yes.
So, you know, don't be afraid to charge for that labor. It's super important. You know, like you wouldn't ever go to you know, a doctor's office and say, oh, it only took you 10 minutes to look at my thing. I'm not going to pay you for this visit, right? Like, no, that doesn't work like that,
Okay.
right? Like you have to, if you're a professional and you're charging, like,
oh, of course, you pay by the hour, whether you stay 10 minutes or 15 or
exactly,
45,
exactly.
You're paying the hour.
Yes. Yeah. So, you know,
I think lawyers are that way too.
What oh yeah. I mean, you know, any professional, like we're like, you know, yeah, if you want something done, and like just don't expect it to be free. And that works on both sides, because honestly,
you're trying to make a living here.
You're trying to make a living.
Of course, they need to respect your profession.
And as a creative and as a creative professional, you don't want to get overwhelmed, and you don't want to start like, okay, for instance, in the past, I was a little bit shy about charging my clients, you know.
I'm the same way.
They would ask for something and I would do it, and then they would ask for a bunch more, and then I would just like do it, but then I would get like upset, like with myself mostly. I'm like, I know, I just worked on this, I worked for 5 more hours on this thing, and they didn't pay me anything more, you know. And then your friends are like, well, why did you, you know, like you could.
It's your fault.
It's
you
your
brought
fault.
it on yourself.
Yeah. So it's easy, obviously, like being generous is a good thing, but if you're going to put 5 hours of work in, you should be compensated for your time, because if you're not compensated for the time, it's just going to make you frustrated.
Sure. There's no
And-
incentive for you then.
Exactly.
Yes.
So anyway,
Okay.
getting back to a little bit of frequency separation. So right now what I'm doing is just kind of sampling some skin tone and painting right over top of all the little areas that I just want to kind of smooth out a little bit. So you can see it's pretty subtle in this case. I'm not super zoomed in on this photo. I don't recommend being super zoomed in. We're going to be able to do a great job retouching this photo without zooming in at all. You'll see for this whole process, I'm not even going to zoom in. All right. Well, I think we're looking really, really nice. Everything is looking nice and subtle. Now, all of this, this entire process is non-destructive, meaning I can turn this stuff off and on at any time. So let's go ahead and show you the before and after with our frequency separation. So here's our before and the after. It's pretty awesome, huh?
Yeah.
There's our before again and the after. Now, if there's anywhere that you think you just maybe like overdid it a little bit, that's really not a problem. Just pop a layer mask onto that group, okay? And then paint black on your layer mask again with a low flow. I'm just gonna bring back just a little bit of the original here, because I think just around the eyes here, I think I overdid it just a little bit. So I wanna make sure I bring back some of that detail. There we go. Make that visible and invisible.
And you can only do that because it was a smart object.
Exactly, and we're working in a non-destructive way, so we're working with layers here. Okay, so that would be my next step. Now, we've done blemish removal, we've done coloring, we've done frequency
Liquify.
separation. We did liquefy, that was our very first thing, and now it comes time to sharpen our photograph. And with sharpening, we just did it, so I'm gonna go a little bit faster here.
Okay.
But I suggest sharpening specific areas of your photo. So in this case, we're just gonna sharpen our subject's eyes. Okay? So let's create a new layer. Okay? I'm going to create our new layer. I'm gonna go to image, down to apply image, which just puts a snapshot of my image just here on this layer. There we go. Now we're gonna desaturate that. I'm gonna turn this into a smart object. We're gonna change this to overlay blend mode, and I'm gonna use a high pass filter. There we go, and choose a radius. Now I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and click on my layer mask, and then just paint this visible just over top of my subject's eyes.
Nice.
Perfect. Now I can go here and change this high pass filter. There we go, and decide how much sharpening that I'd like. So you can see I can do more or less. Obviously that's way too much.
Yeah.
So we can change this at any time. We want to make sure we're getting something a little bit, we want to make sure it looks natural. So let's zoom here a little bit. Let's just turn this off and on. Off and then back on again. Pretty subtle, but it just helps us focus on our subject's eyes just a little bit more. Perfect. I think we're looking great. So let's go ahead and take a look at our before and our after. I'm just gonna group all these layers together. Again, this is non-destructive editing. So we're gonna group all the layers together, and here's our before and our after. So pretty subtle, definitely still keeping in line with
Integrity
like,
of the face.
yeah, she still looks like herself, like it doesn't, I didn't do anything crazy. We're just a couple subtle things here and there, and they all kind of add up to general retouching. And that's kind of my approach. That's what I would, that's what I'd like to see.
That's the order you'd work in.
Yeah, and that's the order that I would work in.
Very good. Okay, so we have a question from Thales in Miami.
All right.
And he gives a shout out to both of us.
What up, Thales?
The question is, he'd like to know how to remove the background of images, like the one he's provided, which is image 17. And he'd like to keep the main subject in this picture, which is the vase.
Okay.
So he just wants to improve the background and keep the vase.
He wants to keep the vase, and he wants to keep the color checker in there as well?
He didn't mention that. I'm assuming that goes.
Okay, well, I'm not going to be able to remove that because it's kind of covering up the entire vase.
Yeah.
But we will work on the background.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So our question is on cleaning up the background. Now, I'm guessing you shot this for, archival purposes? Oh, removing the background. We'd like to remove the background.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we'd like to remove the background. Well, in that case, it's actually relatively simple because they did a good job photographing this product on a pretty clean background. So we're gonna be able to use our selection tools to turn the background into a selection, and then we're gonna be able to remove the background. Okay, so let's go ahead and start off with our magic wand tool. And the reason I'm gonna choose the magic wand tool is because we have relatively hard edges. You can see around basically our entire product here,
Yes.
right? Pretty hard edges, and the magic wand tool is gonna do a good job with hard edges. And it's also, we've got a good amount of contrast between color and light and dark. So the magic wand tool is gonna do a good job. So let's hit W for our magic wand tool, and I'm gonna click here on my image, and we'll see each time that I click, it selects a different area of our photo. There we go. Now, a good kind of like method here as you're selecting around, as you're clicking with your magic wand tool, a good method is basically every time I click, I'm just kind of looking to make sure that it's selecting what I want. Now, if it selects too much, you want to bring your tolerance down. If it selects not enough, you want to bring your tolerance up. Yeah, so in this case, my tolerance of 23 actually looks really good. It's not selecting my whole background, but of the areas that it is selecting, it's doing a really nice job. So what I'm gonna do is hold down the Shift key, and that's going to allow me to add to my selection every time I click. So holding Shift and clicking around my background, there we go. Oh, you can see it spilled onto the little dresser there. So you hold Alt or Option if you want to subtract out. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I've just used the magic wand tool, holding down Shift a few times to add to that selection, and we've got a really nice selection here of our background. Now,
Should you have made a layer of the background first, or it doesn't matter?
that's a good question. So you can definitely make a layer. What I'm gonna do with this layer itself is I'm gonna create a layer mask.
Okay.
So a layer mask is still totally non-destructive because you can turn the layer mask on or off at any time. You can delete a layer mask, you can change a layer mask.
Right.
So you could make a copy, but in this case, I'm just gonna add a layer mask, and that's also non-destructive.
All right.
Yeah, you would never just wanna hit delete, by the way. Like, cause that would just get rid of it for good.
Forever.
And you don't have that information. But a layer mask will just hide that area.
Okay.
So if you want that area back, you can get it back at any time.
Good to know.
Good question. So now that we have that selection active, the edge of my selection is probably just a little bit jagged because that's kind of, the magic wand tool just does that a little bit.
Right.
So we want to smooth that edge out.
Okay.
So we're going to go up here to select and mask, and that's going to allow me to smooth it out. So let's go ahead and bring all of our settings down to 0. I'm going to click Command plus a couple times, and you can see the edge is just a little bit jagged.
Yes.
Okay, so my suggestion is we're gonna bring up our feathering just a little bit, and that's gonna soften the edge. And I'm also gonna bring up my contrast a little bit as well. So feathering and contrast together usually help you smooth that edge out. Okay, so let's just click on the Show Original so you can see it's pretty jagged to begin with, and then turn that off, and you can see we have a much smoother edge. All right. Now I'm going to output this just to my selection and hit OK. So basically we started off with a magic wand tool to make that selection, and then I kind of clean the selection up a little bit. So now that the selection is clean, I'm going to click on my layer mask icon, and basically it's going to cut the object out of the background. Now in this case, it's the invert of what we want, right?
Right.
So I'm going to click on my layer mask and hit Control or Command I to invert my layer mask. And there we go. Now our vase is on a brand new layer. Now I'm going to take this one step further because we have a little bit of this background color
That's right.
that's being reflected over here, right? So let's go ahead and I'm gonna create a solid color background. We're just gonna go to white. There we go. And now we just wanna work on any of this reflected color. So what I'm gonna do is create a new layer. And with this new layer, I'm gonna use my brush tool. So B for the brush tool. And I'm gonna sample the color here that I know this table is, you know, like a very dark brown. It doesn't have this green in it. So I'm gonna sample the color of the table that I know it actually is. And I'm going to paint on top of this. I'm gonna paint right on top of here. Now, I'm gonna show you guys how clipping masks work because they're super helpful. Have you ever used a clipping mask?
I'm not an expert on it.
Not an expert on the
Yes.
clipping mask. Okay, well basically how a clipping mask works is you can, like if you cut something out of its background, you can put a clipping mask on top of that and then you'll only affect that thing that you cut out from the background. So it basically saves you from creating a bunch of different layer masks. You don't have to create selections a bunch of times.
Yes,
It's
which is how I overcome that. Now I know.
Now you know clipping
Yes.
masks are super, super helpful.
Yes.
Yeah. and they're
Faster way too.
much faster and they're actually more accurate also.
Okay.
So they really are the best way to do this. So this layer right here, I'll just grab some colors and paint over top of this face, okay? Now, obviously this is a regular layer. It's just visible everywhere, right? Now, if I want this to be visible only where the vase is visible, I just right click and I go down to create clipping mask. And then all of a sudden you can see it bumps over to the right. Okay, we've got this little arrow down. So this arrow is saying that this layer is clipped to this layer. And because this layer has a layer mask on it that's making it only visible right there, this layer is also only going to be visible right there.
Okay.
So no matter what I do to this layer, you know, I can just draw with another color on here. This could be an adjustment layer, could be a hue saturation, whatever. I can move this layer around. They're not tied to each other in any way. It's just that this layer is now only visible where this layer is visible, which is very, very helpful. All right, so let's go ahead and move that back to its original position. I'm just gonna clear this layer. And now what I wanna do is I wanna paint with the original color of this little dresser here. There we are. And I'm gonna change my layer blend mode from normal down to hue. All right, or in this case, let's go down to color. It's gonna be a little bit more subtle. So with this color setting, now you can see I'm just completely removing the color cast from the background, which is pretty cool. Now we're also seeing a little bit of a color cast here on the vase. So what I'm gonna do is sample the color of the vase and paint here as well. There we go. And as I paint around the edge of the vase, we're gonna see that my color cast is again removed. There we go.
Very, very clever.
It's pretty great, right? So oftentimes we get to thinking that, okay, my selection needs to be better, my layer mask needs to be perfect, whatever, because we get a little bit of a fringe, like a little bit of a color fringe. But oftentimes that issue can be totally solved with just a little bit of a clipping mask and painting in the proper color. So let's just turn this layer off and on, and you can see, let's just finish it up here. There's still a little bit of green down there. Perfect. All right. There we are. Cool. So we can see here, turning this layer off and on, we're able to completely remove all of the color cast from the original background. So now we could put any background we want on this and we're good to go. All right, great question. I hope that helped out. We got some good Photoshopping today.
Yes.
I'm having a great time.
I like this one very much.
I do like it as well.
Really good. Thanks, Tels.
That's a really cool
Yeah.
vase.
Pretty cool.
Well, I just want to give a little quick interlude to say thanks for watching, guys. And if anyone is interested in submitting your questions, where can they do that, Cherie?
At FLEARN.com/live.
That's right. You can submit your questions and you can submit your images. So just like this image that we worked on from Fails from Miami, we could be working on your image. So if you've got a problem image, you're not sure what to do with it, just submit it on FLEARN.com/live. And
while you're there, follow the banner for the 30% coupon.
what 30% off coupon?
You didn't know?
I didn't know.
Well, it's a 30% coupon to subscribe.
I totally did know.
I know you know.
Of course I know. I'm the one who made the
fooling
banner.
around.
It's actually a great deal. So right now during this live broadcast, you guys can save 30% on any tutorial we've ever made, also on our subscription, which means you can access all of our tutorials, everything we've ever made.
24/7.
It's incredible.
It's awesome.
You're a FLEARN Pro subscriber?
Yes.
I'm glad to have you on board.
Actually, you know, I learned everything from your free lessons.
From our free lessons.
And Photoshop for me was the hardest thing to break into. I was using Lightroom and then realized I needed to take my pictures next level. Could not break into Photoshop, so intimidating, didn't know where to start. I started on the free lessons.
Perfect.
And now I'm getting there.
Now you're good to go. Yeah, so that's the whole idea. That's like from day one, we wanted to make education that was affordable to anyone. So yeah, if you want to learn, I mean, we have got over 600 tutorials for free on YouTube. So
That's right.
anything you want to learn there, if you want to take your levels, like knowledge to the next level, then the Pro subscription is the best way to go. But if you're just like, give me some free stuff, just check us out on YouTube because we're going to keep making free videos forever, basically.
Fantastic. And while we're here, congratulations to FLEARN on their first anniversary of FLEARN Pro.
Yeah.
We're super excited about that.
We are super excited. It's been an awesome year. We've learned so much, and we are actually launching a brand new website. Very exciting. Should be live
cool.
this week. I don't want to give too much.
The sirens are
information.
sounding for us.
Yeah,
in this
exactly.
announcement.
Exactly. All right.
All right, so we got James from Adelaide, Australia.
Hey, James.
Image 20, please. He would like to know how to reduce brightness in parts of a photograph and how to take out the sun from the sunset.
How to take out the sun from a sunset.
Yes. How to reduce bright parts in this picture.
Okay.
And also remove the sun from the sunset.
Remove the sun from a sunset. That's
Yes.
kind of like...
Or reduce,
I'd
rather.
like you to take all this ice cream out of my ice cream cone.
Yes.
That's kind of the feeling that I get from that.
How do you reduce the very bright parts of a photo, like the sunset like the sun in the sunset?
Okay, reduce the bright parts.
Yes.
Okay, but we're not going to take out the sun completely.
We're bringing it down. That's
Okay.
my error.
Bringing it down. Okay, perfect. Well, great image to start with. So when I look at this photo, my first inclination is to say, we don't really need to bring the brightness of the sun down. I think we need to bring the brightness of the rest of the image up.
To
match it. Yeah, so that's my first inclination when I look at this photo.
Perhaps James is trying to get a silhouetted effect here.
Perhaps he's trying to get a silhouette effect. Totally. And with that effect, we'll do both.
We'll do
If we
both.
want to remove some of these light areas, we can most definitely do those. Okay, now what I'm going to do to start off with here, I'm going to go ahead and I've opened my image here in Adobe Camera Raw. Okay, now the first thing that I'm going to do is go to my lens corrections, and I'm going to go ahead and enable our profile corrections. Now, this is going to basically help out with our distortion and our vignetting. Okay, now going to our image as a whole, I'd like to increase the shadow levels of my photograph. And by increasing the shadow levels, this is not going to affect our highlights in any way, okay? So this is not gonna make the light areas any brighter, it's just going to increase our shadow levels. Okay, now if you wanna take that a step further, which in this case I do, I'm gonna go to my tone curve and I'm gonna pull my shadows a little bit higher in my tone curve as well. There we go. And doing that lowered the saturation a little bit, so I'm going to bring up our vibrance just a little bit to compensate that as well. Okay, Now, we also have some really nice tools here for straightening out our image. Like, let's say we wanted to straighten out the horizon here, this photo.
Yes.
We have a straighten tool. It's really nice to use. You can basically just click and drag on the horizon and you let go and it basically straightens out your image for you. There we go. So now let's go back to our hand tool. You can see that we basically completely straightened out
Yes.
our horizon, which was really, really nice. Okay, so now getting to our original question was sometimes the brights in our images are just a little bit too bright. That's a very, very common thing. So my suggestion would be to start here in either Lightroom or in Adobe Camera Raw and see if you can reduce the visibility of those brights. Now, we'll go to our conversation cam because there is one more thing that I do want to address.
Okay.
Now, if you have bright areas in your photo and they're so bright that you lose all of your information, do you know what's that called? What do you call that when you lose all that information?
When you take the picture and
Yeah,
you lost
it's
it.
like just if it's
Like a big hot spot.
a hot spot,
Yeah, or
right?
blown out.
Or blown out.
Yes.
Yeah, a hot spot or blown out or overexposed. It's
Yes.
all the same thing, right?
Yes.
The thing about that is if it's a hot spot or it's blown out, it's basically just goes completely white in your image, right? Like and what that means is you don't have any information there.
Yes.
There's no information. So even if you try to bring that light darker, what happens is it's just white, right? So if you try to bring that a little bit darker, most of the time it just turns gray.
Yes.
You know, so that's kind of like the big issue, right? Like if you have a sky that's just a little bit too bright, you can bring the information back usually. But if it's totally blown out, if it's just white,
Yes.
then there's not much you can do to get back that information because it's outside of the dynamic range of the camera.
Which is why underexposing is sometimes better.
Sometimes better.
You capture what you need, and then with the aid of Photoshop, you have that information.
Exactly.
And you can manipulate however you want,
Exactly.
or to bracket even.
To bracket. Can you explain bracketing to people who don't know what bracketing is?
Bracketing is capturing an image in an underexposed fashion, an overexposed fashion, and in a normal situation. Then those images are stacked, so you can bring out more clarity, or it's mainly used for HDR pictures.
Yep.
And it's just a wonderful tool, really. You can control how many images you want to take. So you can, I think it starts at 3 to 5.
3 to 5 is normal,
And you
yeah.
can go all the way up to 99 shots to bracket, which is massive file and raw, but sometimes it requires that detail.
Yeah.
For print and things like that. So
Exactly.
it's also a good way to avoid blown out shots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you guys are in the photography process and you're noticing that you can't capture all the information in your highlights as well as your shadows, that's a good time to bracket. So a couple tips on bracketing. One is you want your camera on a sturdy tripod.
Definitely.
Okay?
Yes.
Because if your camera moves in between each shot, when you try to put those photos together, you're gonna see like little smudges and transparent outlines. It's not gonna look perfect.
And when you overlap them or stack them, they don't stack correctly.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the camera has shifted its focal point.
Exactly, exactly. So you wanna be sure that you have your camera on a sturdy tripod. You also wanna be sure to lock your focus into manual focus, or if you're using a camera that doesn't have manual focus, you just want to turn your lens into manual focus. But basically, you don't want your focus to change during shots, okay? Because if that changes, then the shots aren't going to line up perfectly either.
Yeah.
So my suggestion is to shoot in manual mode also, and then you just want to change your exposure. And most of the time that's going to happen with what I recommend for bracketing is using your shutter speed. Because if you change your aperture, you're going to change your depth of field.
Yes.
Okay. If you change your ISO, you have the possibility of introducing unnecessary noise. So my suggestion is to use your shutter speed to do your bracketing. And with that shutter speed change, you can capture images that are a little overexposed, properly exposed, and underexposed.
And if I may add one more thing, is to use the manual focus on your lens.
Yes.
So that your camera is not moving unnecessarily each time it takes a picture.
Exactly. I completely agree. So that would help you guys out. So I'm going to go back into Photoshop, but you know, if we're looking at like how to solve this problem from a photography standpoint, that's how you would want to fix it in camera.
Yes.
Okay.
Before you bring it to Photoshop.
Before, I mean, I love
so you have
Photoshop.
less work to do.
Exactly. I love Photoshop, but obviously, like, if we can fix something in camera, it's better,
Why
right?
not? Yes.
It's probably going to look better, and it's going to be less work.
Because the more information you capture in your camera, the more information you have to manipulate.
Exactly.
So, yes.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So now getting back into our image here, what I'm going to work on is our light areas. So we have options to adjust our highlights and our whites. So I'm going to take my highlights and we're just going to bring these down a little bit. And you can see I am able to recover information from my highlights. But we are going to notice, if I just turn my highlight warning on, okay, we are going to notice that if this goes back to 0, that we do have some blown out areas. Remember we talked about blown out hot spots? Okay, so if these hot spots are visible, and I just did that by clicking on this little highlight clipping warning. Now most modern cameras will also have a highlight clipping warning. You have a, what do you shoot with?
I shoot with a Nikon D850, baby.
D850.
I got it a couple months ago. They're sold out all over the world. You have to pre-order, you have to wait, it's back-ordered, and I have one.
And you have one, and you're all
I'm so happy.
sitting high on top of the world until they come out with the Nikon D900.
That's okay,
and then
I'll enjoy my 850. Awesome, it's #1 camera in the world right now.
Well,
and Cherie has one.
does Cherie's #1 camera in the world have a highlight clipping warning?
It sure does.
It sure does.
It sure does.
Yeah. So whether you have the #1 camera in the world,
doesn't matter,
or just even a pretty standard, you know, a consumer grade camera, you know, something that's a little bit less expensive, most of those will have a highlight warning on them.
For sure. And they're important to watch.
Yeah. So I keep mine turned on all the time.
Yes.
Basically, it allows, if you take a picture, you will see it on the back of your LCD. Usually it'll blink or it'll show a different color. Yes. And basically that tells you you've lost that information.
Yes.
Okay?
It's usually red like that.
It's usually red like this. Yes. So you've lost that information.
Red for danger.
Danger. So back in Photoshop, we can see how I've lost that information. So I turn my highlight warning on, I've lost that information, meaning that even if I try to bring my highlight values down, you can see I'm starting to bring it down. It's going away, but what's going to happen is that white is just going to turn to gray. You can see how it's just turned to gray here.
Yeah.
And that doesn't look right.
No.
That doesn't make any sense. That's not a true lower exposure. What that is just trying to fill in gray for white. So I wouldn't recommend going near that far, but something like this I would say works pretty well. All right. Now I think we're looking really, really good on this image. If we did want to kind of enhance just a little bit more, to bring a little bit more lightness into the top and the bottom of the photo, what I would recommend doing is grabbing a graduated filter, and you can do this in both Lightroom and here in Adobe Camera Raw. And using our graduated filter, I'm just going to go ahead and reset this to start. I'm going to click and drag from the top down, right about there, and I'm going to bring my exposure up just a little bit. And that's just going to allow the top of my image to just be a little bit brighter. Now, the color temperature doesn't look exactly right, so I'm just going to warm that up a little bit as well to help that look a little bit better. There we go. And then I'm going to do the same thing, basically coming from the bottom up to my image as well. Okay, and there we go. I'm going to just bring my exposure down just a little bit for that one. Let's go ahead and hide our overlays. And I think this is looking really, really nice. So maybe just a little bit, we just need a little bit more color here. So let's grab another graduated filter here, bring it in. And this time I'm not going to bring up my exposure at all. We're just going to make it a little bit warmer.
Okay.
There we go. I think we're looking really nice. So let's go ahead and take a look at our before and our after. So here's our before photo. And remember, we did actually rotate it, so that's not taking this into account. But with our before photo, we have some blown out areas of our sun, And we also have pretty dark areas around the photo in general. And here in our after, we can see we have a lot more information to work with. And this is non-destructive, by the way. All these changes that I've made, for instance, if I turn my overlay back on and I decide I want to change my exposure of this one here just a little bit, I can change these settings at any point in time, making it non-destructive. All right, now I'm going to click here on the bottom of my image. I'm going to make sure it says open in Photoshop as a smart object and hit OK. Now we're going to open this object. There we go. And I'm going to hit F for full screen, and I think we're looking really great. So the next thing that we're going to do, because if you do want to reduce the hotspots, one thing that you can do is use tools like the spot healing brush tool to try to remove them completely. Now this isn't necessary, and you know, this is kind of like a last ditch effort, but if you want to remove some hotspots, you can just remove them with the spot healing brush tool. So I created a new layer here. We're going to grab our spot healing brush tool, and I can simply paint over top of some of these hotspots, and Photoshop is going to figure out what to replace those hotspots with. And usually it's just going to choose a different area of your photo. There we go. And kind of fill in that information. And if it doesn't do a perfect job, no worries. You can always get in with a tool like the clone stamp tool. There we go. And then just do a manual replacement. Or let's go with the spot healing brush tool here. Or the regular healing brush tool rather. There we go. Okay, so you could completely get rid of this sort of thing if you wanted, but what's starting to happen is we're losing a lot of that information, right? Like the light from the image, or the light from the sun, in my opinion, that it helps make the image a little bit more interesting, and it does help it look more real. So if you are interested in removing it, you can do so. I would recommend the spot healing brush tool, but in this case, I think it actually works a little bit better just leaving it. So thank you so much for your question. Great question. Glad we got to talk about exposure and exposure bracketing as well.
Fantastic. Good, good. Kai from Germany has a question. No image.
No image, okay.
What's the best way to get skin tones to look natural? I always feel like there's something off in my final edits, even though I double check while editing by watching at skin tone charts and other images. Okay, skin tone. Now that is a big one. Yeah, capturing the correct skin tone. So my first suggestion, and I'm gonna try to see if we have one, is to shoot with a gray card. I think we have a gray card like right over there. Probably most of you guys know what a gray card looks like. I'm like deciding on running around the studio. We've got like 30 of them here. But my first suggestion is to shoot with a gray card whenever possible, and also be sure you're shooting in 16-bit RAW. So shooting in 16-bit RAW actually allows you to change your white balance at any time. Right.
So you don't have to get your white balance perfect in camera. You can change it after the fact, which is super, super helpful. So shoot in 16-bit RAW if possible with your camera, and most cameras will allow you to shoot in 16-bit RAW. And also shoot with a gray card. So the tip with a gray card is, let's just pretend that your phone's a gray card. How's that? Okay. And it actually is gray, so that's perfect. Or silver, or whatever they call it.
Space gray.
Space gray, okay. Be sure you're shooting with exactly this phone. Okay, so basically what you do is you start off your photo shoot. Anytime you change your lighting or you change your location, start off, and what I do is I just have my subject hold up the little gray card like right at their chin, and you just take one picture just like that.
Wait.
Plus it kind of works as like, it makes it kind of fun because you're like, hey, or hold this thing on their face. And then immediately they're not thinking about getting the picture taken. It kind of like makes them, yeah, the intimidation goes away. So you take one picture like that, and then you just put the gray card away. You don't need it anymore, because you can use that photo to then sync the white balance settings for the rest of the photos during that photo shoot.
Yeah.
So first photo with a gray card, and then the rest without a gray card. So in your post-production software, what you want to do is you want to make sure to white balance using that gray card. Now I actually do have a photo shoot that we did recently of our employees, pictures of me actually. So if you can keep people entertained for about 1 minute, I'm gonna see if I can pull up these images and show you guys how to do it here in Lightroom.
Okay, let's try. So guys, it's great to hear from everyone. We're broadcasting live in Chicago at the FLEARN studio. It's a beautiful space, almost 8,000 square feet.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. I like the eclectic decor here. I don't want to go back home actually. So we wish FLEARN Pro congratulations on their first anniversary. It's a big milestone, and we wish them many, many more years of good videos for us.
Thank you very much.
Yes. And don't forget to keep those images coming, your comments, your questions. Just say hi even at FLEARN.com/live. We are broadcasting at 4 o'clock Central Standard Time. Today there's another show, so join us there also.
Perfect.
And every day this week until Friday, while we'll celebrate the first anniversary of FLEARN Pro.
Great
How
job,
you doing
Sheree.
there?
I'm doing great. I'm just pulling in our pictures from our recent employee photo shoot.
Yeah. Have you seen the filter that you attach to your camera for a green card effect?
No, I haven't seen that.
It's pretty cool. It's they make it in different sizes. Like I think it's 55, 72, whatever.
Wait, what is it?
It's a filter. So you screw it onto the end of your lens.
Okay.
It looks like aluminum prisms, lots of them inside.
Okay.
And you take a picture of it, so you don't have to carry a gray card around.
And okay,
It's
so
really cool.
and then you take the thing back off.
And you take it back off.
That sounds
Your
like just
camera
as
sets-
complicated as carrying a gray card.
But it's that small, and it fit into your
Oh,
camera
it's really
bag.
small?
Well, whichever lens you're using, you can
Yeah.
buy one to fit. But it fits into your camera bag. It never gets squashed,
All right.
and you can even put it into your pocket in the case, and you always have it with you because it's in your bag.
Well, I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah.
Sounds riveting. Well, thank you so much,
Well, you're
Sheree,
welcome.
for killing some time.
You see, I love stuff. A lot of stuff.
Yeah, well, our next break, we can just talk about some of your favorite stuff.
Yeah,
and that'll
let's
be
do
perfect.
that. Let's do that. I'm into drones now.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, a whole new world.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so I pulled up the images here in Lightroom. So
Okay.
I'm going to show you guys how to actually make sure your white balance and your skin tones are really great.
Okay.
So let's jump into the computer here. You can see these are some of my images. Let's
know these guys.
You know these guys.
Oh, they're great guys. They work
That's-
so hard.
That's us.
Yeah.
So we did some employee headshots. I'm gonna go ahead and import these photos. These are raw photos. I'm gonna import these into Lightroom here. There we go. And you can see, there we go. You can see these photos of me. How we start this off, let's just, there we go. How I start off this photo shoot is every time that we take a picture of a new person, we hold up a gray card. So in this case, you can see this is our gray card. We have a bunch of them around here. They're like $10 or $15. They're really, really inexpensive. But basically, hold up a gray card, and you do this for one photo, and then you can see the rest of the photos in the series, you just shoot like regular. Okay. That one's perfect. So how do you get your white balance perfect? Because honestly, the question was about skin tones, but the biggest thing that you can do to get accurate skin tones is to make sure that your white balance is perfect. Okay, if you have perfect white balance, then your skin tones are going to look great. That's the biggest thing that you can do. Okay, now what we want to do is double click here on the image where we have the little gray card. Now here in Lightroom, you can do the same thing in Photoshop and Adobe Camera Raw. I'm gonna go to my develop module, and here I have my big old eyedropper. It's located right here in my develop module. This is our white balance selector. So let's go ahead and click on that. Gives me a big old eyedropper, and it says go to a target neutral. And in this case, what I want to do is just go right over to my gray card and click on my gray card. And you can see that automatically it adjusts my white balance to be perfect. So let's go here into my history. We'll just zoom in. There we go. Perfect. And here's the before you can see I've got a little bit of a greenish tint on my skin, and here's the after. You can see the skin tone looks much more natural. So we'll go ahead and zoom back out. So you take one image with the gray card, okay? You can put it away, and then you can sync the rest of your images in Lightroom. So how do we sync those images together? Well, let's go back to our grid view. I'm gonna click on my first image, and then hold Shift, and then click on my last. So you can see that all of these images are now selected, okay? And my first image is a little bit lighter. So that's my main image, okay? Now I wanna sync the white balance. I want white balance from this to be the exact same on all these. So I'm in my library module. I'm gonna go to sync settings here. I'm gonna start off by hitting check none, and then I'm only gonna check on white balance.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna click synchronize, and basically, as soon as I do, it takes the white balance from my main selected photo and applies the same exact white balance to all of the photos. So now I can look at this photo. I'm not holding a gray card,
yes.
right? This is a totally, it's its own photograph, but it has perfect white balance that I used from the other photograph. So that's my big suggestion. If you guys can do that, if you can shoot with a gray card and then get your perfect white balance here in post-production, that's gonna make a huge, huge difference, and it's gonna make sure your skin tones are represented correctly.
Yes.
Have you ever done that?
A gray card?
Yeah, the gray card.
I have the lens thing.
Oh, you've got the lens thing. What other piece of gear are you excited about?
Well, my most recent addition is DJI Spark.
Oh, the Spark.
Yes. Oh, I have 3 drones.
Okay, Mrs. 3 drones.
I know, it's insane. So I started off with the DJI Phantom 3 Pro.
Okay.
I was going on this world cruise, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna fly it over the Panama Canal because it was so interesting to me.
Wow.
But then there was some trouble in Egypt, and I decided not to take it for safety reasons.
Okay.
So that fell apart. That's how I ended up with 2. And then they're quite bulky. So I decided to get the Spark, so it actually fits into my purse.
Cool.
Yeah, and so I can take it around wherever I like to go.
We actually gave away a Spark earlier this year.
They're so awesome, and they're so inexpensive.
They're great, yeah. We gave it away as a prize. I didn't even see it. We just shipped it.
I know about this?
I know.
Didn't want one.
I know. We just shipped it directly to our contest winner, and I was like, I want to play with it.
Person.
But how do you find the video quality on the Spark? Because the Spark is really small. Is it just as good?
It's okay. It's not just as good. You cannot really compare it to the Phantom Pro 3 because I get better quality there.
Okay.
And it's HD and all of that. But for its size and for just a quick shoot somewhere or a couple stills from above, it's pretty good.
Cool.
It's pretty good. I'm really happy with it. I really am. So yeah, I'm starting to get into aerial photography. I wish I could fly it over Niagara Falls, but with the border there, I'd probably be arrested for even thinking about it.
So, that would totally, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I wouldn't do that. And I want to be a responsible flyer because it's such a beautiful art form to see things bird's eye view.
Makes everything interesting.
And therefore, I really want to follow the rules and be responsible flyer. So I follow a safe area. I always check it out first, make sure there's no planes in the vicinity, make sure there's not too many trees. And
now,
like the Spark technology is better because it now avoids
it'll avoid
objects.
trees and things like that.
But with the Phantom Pro, not so much.
We have a Phantom 4 Pro,
yes,
and that does the same thing. It avoids
I had the
trees.
model before.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. So you need to be a little more alert and responsible, fly responsibly.
Now in Canada, do you have to get a license to fly a drone?
Well, when I started flying, it was so new. There weren't that many people, there were no rules in place. And then slowly, people started having these accidents and disturbing aviation and all of that. So they became a little bit stricter. I did go on a few courses. DJI was in Toronto about a year and a half ago, and I went to a presentation, and they had a proper educational course, which I went on and picked up loads of information. You don't really need a pilot's license, but yeah, you do need to know how to read aerial charts and know where airports are and where you're allowed to fly, not fly, how high to go, or where it's just a no-go zone.
Yeah.
Really, you don't want to take a risk. You may get away with it, but you don't want to take that risk, because if they see your footage at some point and realize where you took it from, they can come after you.
After the fact.
After the fact.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yes, because it's a no-fly zone. You're
I
not allowed
had
to
no
be
idea.
there, and if you cross that line, you have very high penalties. Your device is confiscated, and it's not really worth that risk.
That's
as much
not
as
worth
I
it.
love photography, I follow the rules.
Yeah, it's better to follow the rules, especially if you're a working professional.
Right. And you make it difficult for your colleagues because, you know, they'll
Exactly.
just make it harder and harder for us to have recreational drones in the air.
Exactly.
And we won't be able to get those great shots. So
I agree. I agree. Yeah, when I first started out, I didn't follow many rules. I
usually don't when it comes to photography, but with the drone, it's a little bit different.
It is a
because
different.
You don't want to take that risk of your drone hitting an airplane or killing a bunch of birds that are migrating to Florida for the winter.
It's not worth it.
The rules come in here. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot more
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I think here in the United States, I'm not 100% sure about that, and maybe you guys can let us know in the comments right on YouTube what are the current regulations for flying a drone. But we shoot with a drone every now and then.
Here now.
I think they're
have
pretty
more rules
disciplined
than we do.
because we have a friend of mine flies drone, and he said he had to get a drone pilot's license.
Yes.
He had to
Yeah.
pay for it,
Yes.
pass the test and everything like that.
Yes.
And I think once you get that license, you're good to go. Obviously, you still got to obey the rules.
Yes.
But I'm not current on the new up-to-date rules. So if you guys are looking at getting a drone, be sure to look at those rules because you know,
Yes.
we don't want to get expensive fines just for going and playing with your drone. That's
Because
not
then
worth
it takes the fun away.
Takes
out
the
of
fun
flying.
way out of it.
Yes,
Way out of it.
Yes. Good stuff.
Cool,
So
good
we
deal.
have,
Let's talk about our next
image 21.
image
please,
21.
Eric. And this is from Kevin in Los Angeles. I would like to know your process for removing the distracting objects that is touching her head in this image. Regarding this image, what is your thought process about going with the color image or switching to black and white?
All right.
So two-part question.
Two-part question.
Yes. Removing the distracting object and going color or black and white.
Color or black and white? Well, let's start with the color black and white. I'll start with my general opinion on color versus black and white, and then you can chime in as well with your opinion. So I think in terms of photography, obviously color photography is great. I love color photography. Now, there are certain times when the colors of your photo really make the photo better. You know, let's say that your subject is wearing, you know, a really nice colored clothing, and they're on a background. Let's say they're wearing like orange clothing, and the background is blue. And orange and blue are complementary colors.
Exactly.
So those complementary colors are going to look
Work so
really
well.
good together, right?
Yes.
So in that case, those complementary colors are enhancing what's going on
image.
in the
Yeah.
image.
Yep.
And in that case, I would say no need to convert to black and white. But I would say that there are a lot of cases when the colors in the photo are not enhancing it anyway. Maybe the colors just aren't that interesting. Maybe there aren't that many colors. And a lot of the time, the colors can be really distracting. Especially if I photograph a person outdoors and it's a little bit later in the night, and maybe there are a lot of different mixed colors. Like maybe they're near a neon sign and they get some like green on their face from the neon sign. And you know, there's a lot of mixed coloring on their skin. Most of the time, I'll just take those images and put them right in black and white because I'm like, you know what, the colors are not helping here. They're actually hurting. Let's take that image and put it in black and white. When I photograph for black and white and when I look to create black and white, most of what I'm looking for is contrast between light and dark.
Yes.
And in my opinion, that is one of the key things that makes a black and white image really stand out.
Yes,
Is that contrast between light and dark. What are the shadows doing and what are the highlights doing? What's the light and dark doing? And so if you don't have very much interest in the lights and darks of your image, if the light isn't very interesting, then a black and white, in my opinion, is going to be a little bit less interesting as well. So those would be my suggestions. So if the color is really an integral part of the photo and it's outstanding and it helps make the photo better, leave it in color. If the light and dark values are really beautiful and the color isn't really adding to it, then I would go black and white with the photo.
Yes, I agree with that too. It also depends on what kind of mood you're trying to convey.
Yes.
Sometimes a color image looks really great in color, but once you convert it, it looks even better. And I have a soft spot for monochrome pictures. I simply adore them. I feel they're more elegant, they have an old kind of feel to it.
Nostalgic kind of.
Nostalgic kind of. I'm a Frank Sinatra girl, so like black and white's my thing. So I tend to lean a lot there. Black and white's also more forgiving if you take a really bad picture with high noise in it or whatever. You play around a little bit and then just convert it and you're good. You know, even if you increase the clarity, it's more forgiving than if it were in color.
Yes.
So yeah, that would be my take on that. The one thing I'm not really fond of is selective color. I cringe when I see
Cat's out of the
beautiful
bag.
black and white and then a little ball on the beach that's bright red, and I feel, oh, this is not going.
Why did you do that?
It's a combination of black and white and color if you don't know what selective color is. So yeah, I feel like it's distracting. It's an eyesore for power almost. I want it gone.
I've seen it done well a few times.
Okay, I did
few
it
times.
once. I did it once and I swore never again.
Yeah. No, I mean, of the many thousands of selective color photos that I've seen it done well a few times.
Yes.
In the movie Schindler's List, for instance.
Oh yes.
When everything is black and white and the girl in the red dress,
is walking.
it's being used for effect, and you can see her moving around the frame, and it makes you more attached to an individual. I think that's a brilliant use of selective coloring.
Well, that's a moving picture. That's
True.
different from a still.
That's very true.
Because you move with her, and the color draws your eyes to motion. This.
Not a fan. Well, let's jump into Photoshop and see about removing some object in the background here. All right. So great picture to start off with. Now there are a couple things that I want to do with this photograph just to kind of get us started here. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to bring up our shadow levels here in the foreground on our subject. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my adjustment brush here. Now, I'm going to start by resetting our settings here, and let's turn our mask on. I'm going to paint with my adjustment brush over top of our subject. All right, and I'm learning this computer does really not like this adjustment brush. If you guys watched the live broadcast yesterday, this adjustment brush crashed this computer yesterday. So, you know what? I'm just going to hit cancel here. We're just gonna open this image directly as it is because I'm not gonna mess around in Adobe Camera Raw right now because this computer is just like really not liking that. All right, so let's just bring our image directly into Adobe Camera Raw. I'm gonna have to quit Photoshop. I was on the phone.
No, don't.
I was on the phone with Apple this morning, by the way, seeing if I could get another computer in today.
You did?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. The computer crashed yesterday during our live broadcast, and I was like, that's it. Give me another computer here. It's not worth it. Okay, let's just go ahead and open this image up. I'll just do it in Photoshop because I think that'll work out just fine. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by lightening up our subject here just a little bit. So I'm going to grab a curves adjustment layer. I'm going to go ahead and bring up my mid-tone values. There we go, quite a bit here. Now, obviously this is not looking good on the majority of my subject, but that's okay. We're gonna do some adjustments and it's gonna look great. So I'm gonna start by inverting my layer mask. So let's hit Controller-Command-I on our layer mask. And then I'm gonna simply paint white on my layer mask over top of my subject. My whole subject, including her clothes. And she's wearing black, so it's really, really dark in this case, but we're gonna see if we can bring back some information. There we go. And And I'm not gonna do the perfect job masking here. I'll just bring this a little bit lighter. All right. There we go.
This looks like Santa Monica Pier.
It does look like
Does
Santa
it?
Monica Pier. Last time I was at Santa Monica Pier, I was inebriated. So I don't remember
I
it
think
very
that's what
well.
happens when you go to California. A great wine and
Yeah, welcome to California.
Yeah.
Here's your glass of
have
wine.
some wine.
All right, there we go. So I went ahead and lightened up our subject here. Now, I actually want to restrict this to the shadows of my image. So I'm going to use, I do this a lot. I'm going to run an apply image on this layer mask, and that's going to restrict this to just the shadows.
Okay.
So let's click on our layer mask here. I'm going to go to image and then down to apply image. And then we want to click on this invert icon. Okay. So this invert icon is allowing me to just make my shadow levels just a little bit brighter. All right, now let's go ahead and hit OK. And I realize that doesn't really look that good just yet. So what we need to do here is to go ahead and change our curves. And I just need to make this a little bit more subtle. Okay, it was a little bit too strong to begin with. So we're just gonna go a little bit more subtle. Now, normally I would actually do this in Camera Raw, but this computer is not liking Camera Raw right now. So I'm just gonna not risk crashing it. All right, now I'm gonna create another curves adjustment layer, and this time I'm gonna work on just the highlights. So I'm relighting the highlights and shadows separately on our subject. There we go. Now let's do the same thing. I'm gonna go to image, apply image on that layer mask. I'm gonna uncheck invert. There we go. And now we're just brightening up those highlights, and I can choose how much I'd like to brighten up our highlights. There we go. Maybe just a little bit brighter. So what we've done is basically taken our shadow and our highlight levels, and we've brought them both into our control. So let's just show, there's the before and the after. Pretty good, huh? Looking pretty good.
Yeah.
So I would say we're off to a pretty good start here. There's definitely a little bit of, I'm doing this pretty quickly, but we are off to a really good start here. All right.
Aaron, Kevin's also asking about that object behind her, to remove it.
Yes, is the object this thing up here?
I think that's distracting to me, because he said distracting object.
Distracting object.
Yeah.
I find that distracting, and I also find the little truck down here, I find
Yes.
that quite distracting as well.
Yes.
So we'll go ahead and we'll make sure we remove both of those things. Let's just brighten our subject up just a little bit. Now, I'm gonna get to those in just a second. While I'm working on my subject, I do wanna just work on the color of our subject just a little bit as well. And with this coloring, there we go. I just wanna use a selective color that's just gonna help me with her skin tone just a little bit. Okay, so let's grab an adjustment layer. We're gonna go to selective color, and I'm gonna choose my reds. And looking at this, what would you say is there between yellow, magenta, cyan? What would you say, what needs to happen?
I think she needs some warming up.
Some warming up a little
Yes,
bit.
'cause
Okay,
She's at the waterfront.
she's at the
Nice
waterfront.
Sunny day, blue skies. I think she needs some warming up.
Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and start off by reducing the cyan a little bit, and that's gonna put a little bit more red into her skin. Okay, so you can see with these sliders, I think it's pretty, my suggestion is just to take the slider and bring it one way and bring it the other way and see what helps.
See what looks good.
See what looks good. So, yep, I'm gonna just add a little bit of red. We'll see more yellow, a little bit of less yellow. Yeah, somewhere around there. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, I think your instinct was spot on with that. Okay, perfect. Now our subject I think is looking pretty good. Maybe we'll lower the opacity of that a little bit. Let's go ahead and work on taking out this object here on the very top of our image. Okay, so it may come as no surprise to you, Cherie, that I'm gonna use the brush tool to do this. It's my favorite tool.
It's his favorite tool.
I'm into it. So let's go ahead and create a new layer. I'm gonna hit B for the brush tool. And now with my brush tool, I'm gonna choose a large soft edge brush, and I'm gonna sample this background color. So let's hold Alt or Option, and I'm gonna sample this color here. and then paint right over top of this giant, maybe it's a piece of art, some sculpture, something like that. Basically, I'm just gonna paint right over top of that. And there we go. Now I'm gonna sample some blue here, and I'm just using a really, really large brush, so it's nice and subtle here. Now, if you wanted to find a photograph of some clouds and put that in here, you could do that as well.
Composite it.
You could composite it in. Okay, so we've done a good job removing that object. What I need to do now is go in here and clean up my layer mask just a little bit. Go back in these colors and reduce the amount of yellows just a little bit. Okay, so I want to go in here and I want to layer mask this out so it's not visible over top of her hair. So let's click on our layer mask here. Now I'm going to make my brush quite a bit smaller, and we're going to paint with black. So I'm going to paint with black. There we go. Just over top of our subject's hair. There we are. Looking great. Now, of course, it's going to bring in a little bit of that red area. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring our brush nice and small again. I want to mask this out. There we go. And what I'm doing here is I want to create a relatively hard edge for our subject's hair. There we go. And this is, again, just with the brush tool and a layer mask here. And once we're pretty well defined there, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to paint some more hair onto our subject. Okay, so let's create a new layer here. I'm going to use my brush tool, so B for the brush tool. Now we're going to make a brush that's nice and small, about the same size as my subject's hair, and I'm just going to hold Alt or Option and sample some of my subject's hair, and then I'm just going to paint this in right over here over top of that area. So right over the top of the area, let me just make our brush just a little bit smaller. And you can see I'm just going right here at the edge, and my goal here is just to create a little bit more of a realistic edge.
Let the light through.
Let the light through. Just create, create something that looks a little bit more like hair. All right. Now I'm going to paint with this dark color. I'm going to hold Alt or Option and sample this lighter color. And I'm going to paint with some of this lighter color over top of it. And that's just going to give me a little bit more of a realistic edge to the top of her hair. All right. And if you need to, you can grab your eraser tool, or you can grab your layer mask and just kind of feather that in and help it look a little bit more realistic if you want. What you can also do, another one of my favorite techniques, is I like to create a new layer, and you can actually clone stamp some of the hair that's in the photo. So I'm going to hold Alt or Option to clone stamp this hair. Okay. Then you can see if I bring my layer right in here, obviously we see the light and the dark of that layer, right?
Yes.
I'm going to change my layer from normal down to darken, and then only the hair is going to show up. So it's not going to lighten anything. And then I can just rotate this around. So I'm going to use my transform tool, rotate this around, and then you can right click and warp this and make it actually start to fit into place.
Oh, that's great.
So now I'm using the original hair. This is not, this isn't photoshopped at all. This is not like trying to remake anything. This is actual detail from her real hair from this image that we're able to place over top of that, and that's really going to help sell that effect. Isn't that nice?
It is. It gave her head shape.
More
rounded. And
it's got a little bit of shape,
yeah.
And even if we're zoomed in, it doesn't look fake.
Exactly.
It doesn't look like we removed anything. So let's just show the before and after real quick. Here's our before and the after with that entire object removed. Cool. It's a great example image, and I hope you guys learned a ton about removing objects. And again, when in doubt, reach for the brush tool. That's
our go-to tool.
That's kind of my favorite tool. I kind of want to keep working on this image a little bit, but we're going to move on to get to our next to get to our next question here, because I'm sure we've got a bunch. I appreciate you guys hanging out for our live broadcast.
Yeah.
And I want to get to as many of your questions as possible. We've got about 20 minutes left.
All right.
All right, what's our next question?
So next question is from sunny South Africa.
From it's your
Look at that.
hometown.
It's
Cherie's from South Africa, everybody.
I was born in Durban, so this is super exciting. Hi, Jason. Hoe gaan dit, meneer? That's how are you? In Afrikaans.
All
Did I impress you there?
I am very impressed.
Jason's asking, what is your opinion? What is, in your opinion, is the best methods for dodging and burning portraits?
For dodging and burning portraits. Okay, really great question. So for those of you who are not familiar with dodging and burning comes from the original days of processing film, where you would expose certain parts of your photo to light, either for longer or shorter periods of time to draw more attention to certain areas. So it was literally like burning, like that would darken your image, and dodging would lighten your image, and you would do this with tools. So now we're living in a digital age. You can do the same thing in Photoshop. So dodging is going to make areas of your photo lighter, and burning is going to make areas of your photo darker. So you can do this in a lot of ways. You can do this on your image as a whole. Let's say someone's in the center of your photo and you want to draw more attention to them. You can darken the sides of your photo, and that's going to help your subject stand out a little bit more. So that would be one method of dodging and burning. Now you can also do this on portraits. You can dodge and burn portraits to basically make a person's facial features stand out a little bit more. So the whole thing about dodging and burning is, if you just grab your brush in Photoshop and you start lightening and darkening areas in the image, there's a good chance that you're going to make someone look different. You're going to change how they look, because you have the ability to basically completely change their facial features.
Right.
So if you're going to be dodging and burning in a photograph, my recommendation is to build in a method or a technique that's going to restrict your dodging to just your highlights and your burning to just your shadows. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how to do it.
Okay.
And we'll just use this image. Okay, so let's go ahead and start off. There's a lot of different ways to dodge and burn. Basically what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use my brush tool here, and I'm gonna paint with white and black on a new layer. So let's see, we have a new layer here. So you can see I'm just gonna paint with white on this new layer. Okay, so this would be considered dodging. Now, I'm gonna change the layer blend mode from normal down to soft light. Okay, so this is considered dodging. Now, if I just paint with black on this layer, this would be considered burning. Okay, so dodging is lighter, burning is darker. Now, obviously, if I'm gonna be dodging my image, I wanna do this, we're talking about portraits here. I want to do this to enhance the facial features of our subject. Okay, so obviously if I just put it everywhere, it's not enhancing anything. Now, a lot of folks will just kind of like go in here, they'll enhance the cheeks, they'll enhance the eyebrows and things like that. And that's all well and good, but you can start to like make people look really weird. Like if you did that, you know, starts to look really weird. So my suggestion is to use a method that will restrict your dodging to just the highlights and your burning to just the shadows. So what I'm gonna do is actually paint right over top of our subject's face. There we go. All the way over top of our subject's face. This is gonna be my dodging layer. Now there are a couple of different ways that you can restrict this to be visible in just the highlights or just the shadows. To start off, I'm gonna use something called luminance blending, also known as blend if, and this basically allows me to just eliminate this layer from the shadows or from the highlights if I choose. So to get to your luminance blending, just double click here on your layer. There we go. And I'm gonna hold Alt or Option right here where we see blend if. I'm gonna hold Alt or Option on the bottom layer and separate out these two sliders. Now, as I drag this from the left to the right, you can see in my image that it's just starting to disappear from the shadows.
Yes.
It's cool, right? So this is disappearing from the shadows, meaning I'm not going to be brightening my shadows, because that's not what I want to do. So I can bring out that layer, and then I can bring in this layer, and you can see I'm able to very fine tune how I'd like my dodging to actually affect the image. And this is based on the light values of the image itself. So let's hit OK there. Now I'm going to turn this layer off and on, and you can see this is dodging to bring out detail and bring out texture from that image.
Right.
The face is relatively flat as far as our lighting is concerned before, and after you can see we have a lot more definition. So that's dodging and keeping it restricted to just the highlights. Now let's show the same thing with burning. So I'm going to use my brush tool here, and this time I'm going to paint around the edges. There we go. I'm going to change my layer from normal to soft light. There we go. And now let's double click. I'm going to hold Alt or Option and go from this time from the right to the left. And I want this just to show up in the shadow values. Okay, and in this case I don't want it to be too dark. So we're just going to do right about there. So again, this burning, you can see it's kind of darkening the edges around her face, mostly in her hair. There we go. Turning that off and on. And if you want, you can always go back in here and adjust this to make this more visible in the highlights or more visible in the shadows. There we go. So let's hit OK there, and we can see now we're effectively burning the shadows just a little bit. So let's turn both of these off and then back on, and you can see we've added some depth to the photo. It looks a little bit more three-dimensional. Now in this particular example, I don't think we need to do this burning. I don't think this is helping. I think the dodging helped out, but the burning in this example I don't think is helping out. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Dodging and burning, you don't always need to do both. Sometimes you can just dodge or just burn. So that would be my technique. That's my example.
Very good.
Yeah, I would say you can definitely just go in there with the brush tool and paint it wherever you'd like. But if you can use this luminance blending to restrict that to just the highlights or just the shadows, it's going to look a lot more natural.
Very good. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So we have Bethany from Richmond, Virginia.
Hey, Bethany.
Hey. She says, how do you create a unique and identifiable look in your photographs?
Oh, good question.
We all want to know this.
We all want that.
We want your brain.
You want your own brain.
Yes.
No one's you're not gonna enjoy my brain more than yours.
Side.
Well, I don't know. That comes with other sides too.
Oh,
you
we
know.
just want the catering side.
You want your cake and you want to eat it too. I get it.
She says, for example, the Brandon Wolfels images are recognizable, and although they are different, have a look to them that differentiates his work from others. What is your advice to achieve this?
Okay, now this is a great question. This is about finding your style and creating a look that's yours. Now, I would say that I've been told that my images have a certain look and have a certain style, but it happened on accident, for one. Okay,
Really?
So yes, totally, 100%.
Do
okay,
tell.
so in the beginning, I was asking this same question. Okay, how do I get my look? How do I get my style? And what I did was I took a lot of different pictures. I would look a lot of different photographers that I liked their styles, and I would try to reproduce their styles. So I would be like, oh, that's really cool. And then I would try to make that happen. And what I would do in that process was, you know, try to change my lighting or change the mood in the photos and, you know, do things that I thought might make my photos look more like other photographers' work.
Right.
Okay? And in that process, I learned a lot about photography because I was having to push myself to do something that I wasn't currently doing. Now, along the way, I did produce images that were not exactly like other people's work, but it was like, yeah, that kind of looks like that person's work. That kind of looks like that person's work. And I did that for a while. And what that did is it kind of, I felt like that got me my education. You know, like I learned how to create different looks. And then I kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, I don't want to make anyone else's look now. That's like not interesting to me anymore.
For your own style.
I'm ready for my own style. And that more came about in photographing things that I was interested in and using photography as an expression of myself.
Right.
And I think that my style just naturally developed out of the objects that I decided to take pictures of. I like to take pictures of people. That's really fun for me. It's also incredibly challenging. I like to work with fun colors. I like to produce images that have like a theme or a concept. Like that's fun for me. And then of course I enjoy doing Photoshop, and I like things to be, you know, clean and refined. And I also like creating images that I haven't necessarily seen before. That's what's fun for me, you know.
Originality of it.
If I can do something that I haven't necessarily seen before, I mean, it's all been done really, but you know, to a certain degree, that's fun for me. So it's fun for me to create ideas and then try to like bring my ideas into life through photography, through Photoshop. So those are the things that are fun to me. And I think it's the combination of all those things that I enjoy creating that all that winds up creating my style.
Of course.
So the style is kind of like a byproduct of the things that you enjoy shooting. Like Brandon Wolfel, he's a really great photographer, and he enjoys photographing in a certain style. He enjoys using a shallow depth of field, and I'm not super familiar with Brandon's work. I definitely I've heard of him, and you know, seen his images, and I do like his images. He shoots generally with a shallow depth of field. That adds to his style. He photographs people. That adds to his style. Generally, he does some color work on his images because that's what he likes, and that adds to his style as well.
Yes.
So my suggestion in finding your style is take a bunch of pictures and enjoy taking pictures and bring things that you enjoy. You know, if you really enjoy cooking, take pictures of food. You know, because you're going to enjoy that. You can bring those hobbies together, and then you might find all of a sudden, oh man, I'm taking all these food pictures and it's so awesome. And then you're just going to take a bunch of food pictures, and then maybe one day you're like, wow, that image is super cool. I'm going to keep doing stuff like that, more drawn to stuff like that. And then without even knowing it, in a couple of years, you might have a recognizable style where other people will look at your images and say, that's a recognizable style. But in my experience, what happened to me anyway is I just took images and I did things that I was interested in, and my style just kind of like happened out of that.
Yes. You have to keep the mindset to experiment.
Yes.
Keep experimenting, and eventually you'll find your niche.
Yeah, exactly. And styles change. I mean, honestly, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, I was doing a lot of pretty heavy Photoshop stuff.
Yes.
You know, like a lot of heavy compositing, a lot of stuff that looked kind of like it was done in Photoshop. And these days, I actually enjoy taking photos a little bit more natural.
Yes.
I've been shooting in natural light a lot recently.
It's so much easier.
It's easier
and it's always there.
And it's beautiful, you know. So styles will also change throughout time as well.
Yes.
So I would definitely keep an eye on that. You may already have a style and you may not even be aware of it, and that's going to continue to change throughout time.
Very good.
Well, speaking of time, we are out of time for this live broadcast. I want to say thank you to everyone who joined us for this live broadcast. Cherie, thank you for hosting.
It's so
you were
fun.
an absolute pleasure to hang out with. Wonderful co-host here. You've definitely made this a great experience. And
thank you so much.
I want to thank you guys for joining us as well. So if we did not get to your question during this round, we're coming back today from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And if you have a question, where can you submit your question?
At FLEARN.com/live.
That's right. You can submit your question as well as your image so we can work on it live here in Photoshop. And we're also having a 30% off sale during this broadcast. So just go to FLEARN.com/live. There's a banner on that page with a coupon code. The coupon code is FLEARNLIVE. You can save 30%. So if you've ever thought about joining FLEARN Pro, now is the perfect time to do so. Thank you so much, guys.
Yes, thank you. See you later.
Do you want to say I'll FLEARN you later?
I'll FLEARN you later.
Ah! I'll FLEARN you later
Keep the
also.
fun flowing, family.
Whoa!
That just came to me.
Man, that was good. I think that sets a record.
That's alliteration, guys.
Koa, come on, bud.
Ciao.
Let's say bye to everyone.
Bye.
We're going to say bye with our puppy. Come here.
Koa, come here.
He does not
Are we
want to be
still
on camera. I don't know if we're still on. Koa, come here. Go, come here. He's tired. All right. Oh, there we go. There we go. Koa says bye, everyone. Bye. Bye, everybody. Bye. Did you just wake up from your nap? Yeah. Did you have a good nap? He's my little guy.
Hey, Booze, how are you? Hello. Koa likes cuddles.
Oh yeah, he's a
Big
cuddle.
cuddle bun.
He's a cuddle guy for sure.